there are non-powerful people who are Freemasons,
Yes.
but there are no powerful people who are not Freemasons.
Freemasons.
Freemasons. If you think about the nature of an initiatory group that's been around in its current form for a few hundred years, since the 1700s, right, in the UK, and likewise in France, but they say its origin, or they believe that its origin precedes it to the Knights Templar, right, who were a very powerful order, as we know. From my understanding of the Templars, it's not the idea of like 9 knights showing up in the Middle East during the Crusades, right, to guard the roads, right? It was really more about excavating under the Temple of Solomon.
Yes.
That was, what they were interested were the ancient texts. They want to get
to the Well of Souls.
The Well of Souls, the ancient texts, the things that were, written into like grimoires and hidden, incantations, things that you could basically call upon the spiritual realm, because that's the lore of King Solomon.
Richest man in the world.
Yeah, well, he had the gold, but why did he have the power? Was because he could call upon what they call genies, and he could command them with his ring, the Ring of Solomon, the Ring of Power. And that's what so the real lore of like Masonry, right, was that he had this builder, Hiram Abiff, who could, who architected the temple, the Temple of Solomon. But they had jinn that they called upon to actually do the work and to build it.
And what are jinn?
Genies, what we would call genies in Aladdin's lamp. They are the beings. So I went to Iran. The first time was curiosity, but I went to go meet with some of these guys that communicate to them, to the other side. And I would talk to them about, what's going on in the world. And they would say, the jinn in Islamic lore is very similar to like angels and demons, or the watchers in the Book of Enoch, right? Yes. Who are not, they're both dark and light. Some serve God, some serve the dark side. And so the idea of like the power of Solomon was to be able to have a relationship and mastery. It's a very dangerous gambit once you start communing with that side. But I believe all the initiatory paths, Freemasonry is just one of them, the most famous one, lead you to that realm, to that understanding that there's spiritual forces invisible to us that are working through people in this world. The good news is they don't have any power unless we give it to them. If we give them power, if we give them attention, if we give them energy, if we feed them our fear, when you grow up in Hollywood or whatnot, you realize like it does seem that people can sell their souls and maybe not even be aware of it. Because to me, can be incantations, it can be blood sacrifices and rituals. It can also just be worship of the material realm.
Yes.
Right? So when you get into that realm of like, oh, I want power, I want worldly power, I think that's the satanic path. They don't think of it as such, but materialism at its heart is worship of the earth. If you start worshiping money and and yourself, your own ego, well, you've lost sight of the transcendent power of God.
There's no question about that. There's no question. And I think all of us experience that in our own lives.
The interview between Tucker Carlson and Sean Stone reflects a growing fascination in modern society with spirituality, hidden realities, and the unseen dimensions of human existence. In an age dominated by materialism and scientific skepticism, discussions about supernatural influence have become increasingly popular among people who feel that modern culture fails to explain the deeper moral and spiritual crises affecting society. From an Islamic perspective, many of the themes raised in conversations like these are not entirely foreign. Islam has long taught that reality includes both the visible and invisible worlds, and that spiritual forces can influence human behavior. This understanding provides an important distinction that is often missing in modern discussions about the supernatural. In popular culture, unseen beings are frequently portrayed as entirely evil or terrifying. Islam, however, presents a more balanced picture. Jinn are not automatically demons. They are moral beings capable of both good and bad actions, much like humans.
You joined the Masons. Why did you do that, and what was it like?
So it was a journey of initiation, I think, that I was going through in that time, right out of college. Because in my college years, I started getting deep into studying history, and even in the Procopius was writing the history of Justinian, right? The Roman emperor, Byzantine emperor. And he described him as a shape-shifting demon, basically, in that book, in The Secret History. And that was buried for a long time. And, again, there's all types of histories that King James was James's Bible, but he also wrote a demonology book, right? I mean, this was the way that the world was perceived and understood for centuries, as we know.
As a battleground between dark and light?
Yeah, I mean, as forces that were unseen. I mean, Socrates talked about his daemon, like but be called genius. But, they say like in the old world, there's a theory that when Homer is writing about, the Iliad and about, all these different gods having a play in human life, a lot of people believe that we were in communication more readily with beings, right? Unseen beings. And it may have been a real factor in our consciousness back then. And then we, obviously we get to this place of the Enlightenment when all of that becomes relegated and we say, oh, that's all, hocus pocus and not real. We can only focus on the physical realm. But you can't understand how life begins through the physical realm alone. You can't understand how the universe is formed.
No.
Right? I mean, how does a Big Bang start? It just happens. Okay.
Spontaneous bang.
So I think a lot of the materialists actually, you could say like, people say Darwin and whatnot, are essentially serving the dark side because they're saying there's nothing outside the material realm. This is all that exists, and everything, well, actually all we're interfacing with is our own minds,
yes,
our own perceptions. And so when they want us to believe, a very simplified version of reality, spontaneous evolution, random changes, right? Take away anything spiritual. I think that serves the dark side in a sense, because it elevates our own egos. It makes us, we're the progenitors of this, and we are the greatest thing in the universe. And we can get into that later, but that then serves a transhuman agenda that, it's all about perfecting ourselves through the physical plane of genetics, right? Genetic tampering and whatnot. And you try to basically take the spiritual origin impulse of God creating this universe out of the story, right? That's what the Enlightenment did in many ways. But you can't take it out because we instinctively, as souls that we are in human form, we have this curiosity and this desire to know, okay, where did I come from? Like, it can't, my soul didn't just spontaneously appear. How do I have consciousness? Where does consciousness originate from? Just from our brains? Well, I think we're understanding that our brains are more receivers, almost like, computers that can receive the internet that's around us, right? That's the way that we function more in that way. And that's why people have near-death experiences, or they have out-of-body experiences. And the CIA does this kind of stuff, astral projection, and they can see things outside of their physical body that you can't say, well, your brain knew it. You have all kinds of cases and stories of this, people, who are literally on a hospital bed and they can perceive things in the next room. So consciousness transcends our brain, right? And that indicates, again, a spiritual reality that a lot of mainstream science wants us to ignore. But I was like looking at history and saying, no, we've always had this impulse to see a spiritual reality, or what Plato calls like the ideational realm, the world of ideals, before we get to the material realm. So let's not try to ignore that. So this is the battle. And again, if the dark side has, waged war on mankind, let's say, right? If we believe, and this is not just Christian tradition. I mean, this is like
it's a lot of story there is.
Yeah, it's a lot of stories around the world have talked about this, that there's something that's waging war on mankind. They want possession of the soul. They want us to check out, to surrender, right? To check out, say, hand over control of the vehicle. And that seems to be the real battle, right? Are we autonomous beings? We have control of our vehicles. I mean, we all experienced this during COVID. Imagine all this seems so far out, but like during COVID, we actively saw people checked out from fear and like dead things, putting on masks so they can't even really breathe. They can't, in a court of law, you can't speak if you've got a mask on, right? So like you don't have any say. So when you put a mask on, you're basically taking away your power to speak and to breathe. So you're like a dead thing now. And then beyond that, we saw the hysteria that came with it, from fear. All that fear around, you're infected, you might be infected, this person could be infected, you didn't get your shot, you better stay away. You can't come to the family gathering. You can't come to my establishment. And if you're in California, I left the state because it was like, I can get a fake vaccine card, but I don't want to engage with people that are mandating this.
Right.
What kind of hysteria, what kind of madness is this, right? So we've all experienced that kind of possession. Not like some people personally experienced it and then said, wait a minute, I was in fear and I've woken up. And others just saw it and saying, it's like everyone's possessed all of a sudden by this, by this fear.
Evil influences may tempt people, but individuals remain accountable for their choices. Islam rejects the idea that human beings are helpless victims controlled entirely by supernatural powers. This emphasis on accountability is one of the most important features of the Islamic worldview. While unseen influences exist, Islam consistently teaches that human beings possess moral agency. Corruption in politics, media, entertainment, or culture cannot simply be blamed on jinn or demonic forces alone. Human greed, injustice, and moral weakness are major causes of societal decay. The Quran repeatedly reminds believers that God does not change the condition of a people until they change themselves. In other words, spiritual reform begins with personal responsibility and ethical conduct rather than fear-driven speculation about hidden entities.
It's very interesting to me that some of the main themes throughout human history, blood being the life force, the spirit.
The magic in the blood, right?
The magic in the blood, genetics, bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
These were full-blown preoccupations for every civilization before 1945, and they've just been eliminated from public conversation.
By media. But media is the greatest magician of all, right? It's so interesting that you mentioned 45. Obviously, that's the end of the Second World War.
Right.
British broadcasting was originally part of British intelligence. Like it was always, they understood that propaganda was key. That was First World War effort, bringing us into the First World War, getting us involved, and then obviously the Second World War the same. There was a huge amount of propaganda that was put out for it. But then we adopted those same techniques post 45, I would say, with the various radio projects, whether it was and from radio to television, right? The same concept. A lot of the guys, as you know, that were like intelligence OSS officers or, part of the OSS then became like executives and whatnot for the original, TV channels, which, as you know, at the time was like, like 4? It was like ABC, CBS,
3 plus PBS,
NBC,
4.
Right. And so it was very important to send out messaging. And then likewise with radio, it was the same thing. It was like, okay, first radio was used, for information before television, but then radio became the music. And so it became like top 40, what was it? The top 40 project? Like essentially it was like, let's figure out how to basically condition people using music. And it's no longer going to be symphonic, right? Like long symphonic pieces of music. It's going to be short, 3 minutes or less of, something that can like hook people and
culturally
propagandize over and over, hypnotize people essentially. That's what music does. Think about when we engage with, it's so interesting engaging with young people now and seeing how much like, when I was a kid, hip hop was kind of coming, it was coming on in the 90s. But nowadays it's like all those lyrics, a lot of the more debasing, lyrics, let's say, how do you end up with an OnlyFans culture? Well, it starts with the lyrics that are put out through hip hop music that's propagated to every, young kid across the country. And then that becomes part of the cultural conditioning, languaging, all these things. So I think music is one of the most important magical tools that,
no doubt,
that's used to obviously influence culture. And then obviously not just music, film, and nowadays with streaming, it's putting people into hypnotic states for hours on end, right? When you stream things into the consciousness.
Yeah, or social media are hypnotic, I've noticed, and very addictive. Fear and hate also feed the demons.
Unconscious hate. I think there's healthy, we hate certain things that we find intolerable.
Right.
But if we hate the person, if we demonize the
hating
person,
people.
right?
Yeah.
That's feeding the
wanting
darkness.
to hurt other people,
right?
Having malice toward others.
Yeah, exactly.
And then fear, being terrorized. If those are both spiritual foods for demons, how should we understand our government's concerted effort over many years to make us terrified and hateful?
Not just the government, media with it, right? Like media and government working hand in hand.
Right. I mean, those kind of are the messages, really.
Yeah.
There's someone you need to be afraid of, and there's someone you should hate.
Yeah.
You're required to hate.
With the First World War, Wilson made a huge decision, which I think was a huge blunder, committing us to that war. We should have been an arbiter. We should have said, we're not in favor of either empire. We're going to just arbitrate, a peace deal, and should have stayed neutral, but we didn't. We committed ourselves to the British Empire, and we set up, obviously, as a result of that, with the Versailles Treaty,
hurt so many people.
The Second World War followed, and we, obviously, again, you can get into the whole history of the financiers behind, Hitler and his rise to power, and so it was like we're going to play, Germany against, the Soviets, who also got financial support from us. So it's it became a financier's game, and that's why I say like the power behind the scenes really to me is the financial empire, and the Rothschilds are obviously a part of that. I don't think they're the be all end all of it, but they're a very important force financially. City of London is a very important force, and the Federal Reserve System, which is spawned from that central banking system of England. So that's when we talk about like what who's the American federal government serving. It's been serving the expansion of a debt slavery monetary system, right? Because we're borrowing money every time they're printing money, but they don't own it. It's not like constitutional money. In the Constitution, gold and silver is constitutional money. Everything else is these paper money notes or promissory notes. That's why it's a Federal Reserve note. When you see a dollar bill, it says Federal Reserve note. It's a promissory note. Promise to pay.
Yeah.
Right. So it's all debt. And we're just racking up, as we know, whatever, at 38, 40 trillion, I don't know.
Some unpayable amount.
Doesn't matter. I mean, exactly. It's not going to be, we have to reconfigure this.
In conclusion, the interview between Tucker Carlson and Sean Stone touches on themes that resonate with important aspects of Islamic theology, particularly the existence of unseen spiritual realities and the moral struggles affecting human society. Islam affirms that unseen beings such as jinn exist and that spiritual influences can impact human behavior. Yet it also insists on balance, rationality, and personal responsibility. Rather than encouraging fear or obsession with the supernatural, Islam directs believers toward ethical living, prayer, self-discipline, and trust in God. The Islamic perspective ultimately teaches that while evil influences may exist in the unseen world, the future of society depends largely on the moral choices human beings make every day.
We are partnering with Droplets of Mercy in order to bring life-saving water to the people of Gaza, Sudan, and beyond, who have been affected by war and famine. The best charity is giving water, so click the link in the description box in order to help save lives now.